Good morning and welcome everyone back to part two of our speaker series. Dr. Sadowski is focusing on threats of domestic terrorism, and this is his second presentation in the series. And he has a tremendous amount of experience in this area, and he's going to share with us many like live images of his experiences at the border. And he and I were just chatting before I turned everything on here, and he just got back from DC, where he was there, consulting with some of our leaders, talking about this topic of immigration and domestic terrorism and the threats of that. So, Dr. Sadowski, I'll just turn it over to you and let you take off.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. So for the past 5 years, I've been working in counter trafficking, and a lot of that has been involved going into prison in Central America and interviewing convicted traffickers, sex traffickers, organ traffickers, arms traffickers. And the way I get these guys to talk is as part of their rehabilitation in prison in Central America, I explained to them they can't do anything about the victims they've exploited in the past, but by talking to me, we could protect future victims. And several of them have talked, and they know that I keep their information confidential, and their information has been so detailed that they've explained to me exactly how people are smuggled, people are trafficked into the United States. So a lot of this information is coming from actual current and former cartel members from a prison in Central America. So that's a fact. So, and I'm going to share with you up to date that actually, I'm going to start off with this. This is how serious this is. I received a text message from a former Sinaloa cartel affiliate, a former Mexican mafia, a sex trafficker in Southern California prior to his incarceration. He did 27 years in prison in the United States. He was deported back to his home country in Central America, and I work with him on at least a weekly basis. He explained to me that 2 nights ago, a airplane landed in Central America on the border of Mexico, and he said there's something very there's something very concerning about this situation. And he explained that this airplane was accompanied with a cartel death squad. And what that means is the cargo is not your normal drugs, right? They don't send cartel death squads to protect drugs. They do that to protect very high level assets. So whether it's very important people or if it's something with the intent of harming the United States, and he explained that this former cartel member who got deported from the United States doesn't want to see anything bad happen to the United States, but he is so concerned that he reached out and he said, whatever that cargo was directed to the United States, it's on its way. It's probably already here by now. And he said, whatever that is something that is probably a threat to the United States. So that's what we're dealing with. The same cartel member, he explained to me that after 9/11, there was a mandate. And the mandate was that the cartels are not permitted to bring anyone into the United States that is a suspected terrorist or even a terrorist country. Well, I can tell you that was over 20 years ago. He explained that now, because the cartels have splintered and there's no longer a mandate, a hierarchy, that cartels, in fact, are bringing in people that have the intent to do harm to the United States. So that's what we're dealing with. That's why this discussion is important. And I'll share with you more about what I've learned from him. But to give you a little bit more context, so this week made a total of 10 times that I've served as a consultant for committees on the United States Senate and the United States Congress committees. I sat with Senator Grassley's committee 2 days ago on Tuesday in Washington, D.C., and explained exactly what we're talking about. I talked about so it would have been the night before that the cartel member reached out to me. So I talked to him about the airplane and about that cargo. I talked to them about the fact is that because we have abandoned the responsibility, the current administration created 94 executive orders in the first year of office that basically opened up the border. It's not a political statement, it's a fact. So as a result, we've had over 10 million people come into the United States. 8 million of them have come in. and have been processed by Border Patrol, many of which are given a court date 4 to 7 years, and then they are released. When they are released, they're sent to non-government organizations that we, taxpayers, pay billions of dollars to for them to house, provide care for migrants. Laken Riley's murderer was staying on taxpayer dollars at a 4-star hotel in New York City prior to getting flown by your tax dollars to Georgia, where he killed that girl. He was illegally in the United States. The border, with it being open, and now the cartels no longer caring if somebody is coming into the United States, creates such a level of high risk of terrorism within the United States that our own FBI director, Chris Wray, said that alarms are going off everywhere. He said that in his career, he's never seen a time of a more heightened alert that we need to have about terrorism. So this is occurring on, let me be very clear, on President Biden created this catastrophe. And if we do have a terror attack, that's going to fall on him. It's going to fall on Mayorkas, which is the Secretary of Homeland Security. It's not a political statement, it's just a fact. I can prove it. I've testified to it. I've testified before the United States Congress. I've testified before the Senate. Just this week, we testified at a very tense hearing, the most intense hearing I've ever been in. And it was actually my partner that did it. And by the end of this, I'm going to share with you that testimony. I'm sorry, the link to that testimony. I encourage everyone to watch it, because truth is told there about the 320,000 children that were brought to the United States, processed, and sent into the United States to unvetted sponsors and are missing, or unaccounted for. I'll leave it at that because we're here to talk about terrorism. We have an identity crisis. Let me explain to you what that means. When I was on the border last time, these are actual identifications. Let me see if I can zoom in. Oops, figure out how to do that. Let's zoom in here. These are actual identifications that we've picked up, my team and I have picked up on the southwest border. China, a Middle Eastern country, I can't read it. Colombia, China, Pakistan. I've seen, so we have thousands of these. We have boxes and boxes of these. Most of them are burned, but not all of them. Some are in great shape. When I was on the border, I picked up a passport of a 5-year-old Colombian girl that I believe I talked about in the first series. Kevin, is that correct? I did cover about the 5-year-old Colombian girl, correct?
Yeah, I believe it was one of your stories that you talked about.
Okay, and I had the passport. Okay.
Yeah, and also, I don't want to interrupt, but I think you mentioned when Corey shows up.
Okay.
Okay, so Corey's here now.
Perfect. Thank you for letting me know. None of this would be possible. This discussion today wouldn't be possible without a hero, an American hero that is in here right now. He is an Army veteran. He lives on the border. He cares about the border. He cares about our country. And I can tell you that I can speak for Corey in this regard, and that we are completely fed up with what has been allowed to happen the last 4 years that is costing the lives of many, many people. In fact, these pictures that we're looking at, this is located at Corey's property, because this is the work that he's doing in terms of going and getting these identifications. So I said our team, I was referring to Corey and somebody named Allie Hopper. So the reason why these IDs are getting ditched, what according to our source, that was a cartel member, is that they're getting ditched because the cartels tell these people, when you get to the border and you get processed by Border Patrol, make up a new name. In some cases, they're given new identifications. Border Patrol told me that if somebody comes into the United States and says their name is Mickey Mouse, they're getting entered into the database in Border Patrol as Mickey Mouse. It's a fact. So the cartels know this. Well, why would the cartels erase the identities in the history of people? That's a fair question. It's as fair as question as to ask, okay, 8 million people have come in and benefited, have come in and been processed, been given a court date in the future, and are benefiting from taxpayer dollars paying for hotel rooms. They're working in NGOs that are providing a rice and beans diet, but charging the federal government steak and lobster. It's a fact. Billions and billions of tax dollars have been paid by these NGOs to manage, to house, to feed migrants. So if you know you can come to the United States and receive Section 8 housing or a hotel for free, free food, a free phone, and in California, free healthcare, well, why wouldn't you? I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is the government estimates that 2 million people have come into the United States through the cover of darkness. 2 million people didn't reach out their hand out and take the benefits and the incentives that we've provided. Well, why would that be? Is it because the country that they're from is, part of the foreign terrorists, the countries that have been recognized as, either the axis of evil, or countries that, are known to house terrorists? What is the reason? I don't know the answer to that. But what I know, when I saw this at Corey's property, and it is really, I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. This is Corey's work. We were down there on the border and we found the 5-year-old Colombian girl's passport. But this is the work that Corey does. And in terms of working on the border every day, providing intelligence to our Border Patrol that is so understaffed, overwhelmed with the amount of people. Imagine processing 8 million people. So instead of covering the border, they're in their facilities processing people. Let's see. So let me go ahead and zoom back out. Whoop, a little too far. This also came from Corey. This is literature from Antifa in how to evade law enforcement at the border. Just let that soak in a minute, and please read it. What they call the unarrest. We are allowing Antifa to instruct people that come to the United States illegally how to avoid being captured. The picture on the right isn't related to terrorism. It's just a great picture. We actually took this when we were on the border with Corey. Allie did. The picture on the left, let's talk about that a second. That's what they call a falcon. It's a cartel member that in his hand is a rope. That rope actually extended up over the wall, and Corey and Allie and I witnessed people being smuggled over the wall, a child being handed by that individual through the border paneling, a child, a baby, being handed through the border wall to the people that came up over the ladder. Took them 45 seconds. Within 2 minutes, Border Patrol arrived, and Border Patrol, which is known as Migrant Uber, showed up, had a 30-second discussion with them. They piled in the back, and today they're somewhere in the United States. This is what we've allowed to happen the last 4 years. And as somebody who served 26 years in the United States military, I was quiet for 26 years because I had to be. I'm not quiet anymore. I want everybody to know. I want everybody to know about the corruption that has led to the risk of terrorism and to costing people their lives, including children. This picture on the left is at the border wall in Texas. About the same size, and if I'm not mistaken, the only difference I saw between California and this border in Texas is that on the top, there's like a metal, it's like a piece of metal that's up there that looks like it's barbed wire. It's not. We actually, because there was some on the ground, we actually touched it. It doesn't cut anybody. Whenever these people we saw come up over the wall on the rope ladder, they just pushed it out of the way. They just made a hole in it. So my point in sharing that is to express how easy it is for somebody to come into the United States. And I briefly touched on it. Yeah, there was a committee hearing on Tuesday that I'll provide in the chat box once we're done, that I have never heard a committee hearing that shared so much truth, that shared so much evidence. Corey and I's partner, Allie, is a Hispanic female. It's very personal to her. She's from Mexico. Her family is. I encourage everyone to listen to this testimony because it is not well known. It's just now starting to be talked about. We've been on the news screaming from the mountaintops about what we saw when Corey took us down to the border and what I saw when I went into Texas. I can say now, especially after this week, with 100% certainty, our message has reached over 100 million people about what's truly going on at the border. But how many of them are listening? Customs and Border Protection. This data I got from the government website. Since 2021, 382 illegal aliens on the terror watch list have been caught illegally crossing our border, and some were released. They scrambled and went and picked some of them, I think it was 40 of them, picked them up later. But remember, 2 million people were able to sneak into the country. Here we go. So, and this is from the United States Congressional Committee on Homeland Security, which is I work very closely with. This is from their website. This is from a government published website. At least 99 illegal aliens on the terror watch list were released. We don't know where they are, just like we don't know where the 320,000 children are, because we have allowed this to happen. At least 99 processed, still released. To share with you how broken the system is, we have people that are MS-13. We have people that are Tren de Aragua, which means TDA, which is the Venezuelan gang you keep hearing about in the news. That group is so violent. This is the group that took over apartment complexes in Colorado. That group is so violent that the Mexican mafia refers to them as terrorists. They don't refer to MS-13 as terrorists. They don't refer to the Bloods, the Crips, others as terrorists. They don't even refer to other rival cartels in Mexico as terrorists. But they call TDA, Tren de Aragua, terrorists because they're terrorists. Now, what they do is they come in across the border all the time. They're now in 14 states. 14 states. What they do is they use extreme violence. They use torture. They do unspeakable things to people. And we have allowed them to come into the United States. What they do is they come in with caravans of Venezuelans. We actually have some coming right now. So about 10 months ago, there was an agreement between Mexico and the United States to reduce the flow of migrant traffic to the border. And what they did, the agreement was that in southern Mexico, it's called Tapachula, which is in the state of Chiapas, which is in the border of Guatemala and Mexico. They've created these big facilities that are housing migrants. So for the last 10 months, you've seen, in an election year, you've seen the numbers drop coming to the border. Mexico, because they went into agreement with the United States, went and rounded up all these migrants. And some of them were almost to the border, rounded them all up, sent them down to down to southern Mexico. It just came out in the news today that 6 caravans from what is somewhere between 500 and 800,000 migrants are on their way. And as these people are released, as we get closer to January, it is going to overwhelm the system. And you can be assured that in some of these groups, especially with the Venezuelan groups, because Venezuela gets has special status for amnesty. So Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela is a 4th country, escapes me. So they're given an asylum claim court date in the future. So TDA, they're not all of them are part of that 2 million people that came in that are called gotaways. Some of them are coming in, our government is paying for them for their care. And then the reason why we're not able to catch them effectively is they hide within migrant Venezuelan communities that people are terrified of them. And it's very difficult for law enforcement to even identify them because they're smart enough not to come across the border with tattoos. So, and this has been going on since 2015 is when it really hit the radar in terms of who this gang was. And it's always been a problem in Central America. Matter of fact, the US government in Peru developed a task force almost 10 years ago to mitigate the threat of this terrorist group. So going back to our statistics here, 99 illegal aliens, according to the federal government, released into the United States, and we don't know where they are. And this was only between 21 and 23. This is an interesting point. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, has identified 400 illegal aliens that came from Central Asia that crossed into the United States via the ISIS, Islamic State terrorist group affiliated smuggling network. Well, regardless of those 400 migrants from Central Asia countries, why is it that there's the ISIS affiliated smuggling group? And if they can bring 400 people from Central Asia, it would be very easy to bring in 4 people who have the intent to do harm in the United States. And this is a self-inflicted wound. And when we know that we have an ISIS-affiliated smuggling network and we're doing nothing currently, a day of reckoning is coming soon. But currently, we are doing nothing to shut down this ISIS terrorist-affiliated human smuggling network. It's so crazy on the southwest border that Corey located a cell phone that had information that he was able to extract that talks about how to purchase a child for sex. It talks about how to get into the United States illegally. It even talks about the state of the US nuclear posture. Why is that? I can tell you, and I don't agree with much with what FBI Director Chris Wray says, but the one thing I do agree is that we have never been at a time, aside from 9/11, of a heightened risk of terrorism on our shores, within our shores. Hopefully it's not at the beach, within our shores. And it has overwhelmed the system. And that's why you're seeing so much on the news about, Tom Homan, which I know, he's a good guy. A little abrasive, but a good guy. I like him and I know him. I would say that to him. So that's who you need in that position, in my opinion. So what is the process, right? What can be done to fix this? I ask that all the time. Mass deportation. What does that mean? Well, it means different things that, is mass deportation going to solve the risk of terrorism in the United States because of the 10 million people that have come in illegally in the last 4 years? Well, I was in federal law enforcement for 26 years. And a lot of that time was spent, about half that, 8 years was active duty, the rest was in the reserves, but I did go active duty a couple of times during that period of time. As a reservist, I worked as a local police officer. So, I've seen it from the law enforcement perspective. And I can tell you that there's only so many resources, there's only so many HSI agents. You have governors saying that they're going to stop the federal government from enforcing the law. That's insanity. That's insanity that's allowed to happen. I witnessed it. I watched the news. I saw Governor Pritzker state that Tom Homan and his people are going to have to go through him to enforce federal law in Illinois. It's not acceptable. Until more of us are willing to speak out against this, we really can't complain because we're not doing anything to stop it. I can tell you that I have risked my family and I's safety. I can tell you that, this work that I'm so passionate about, and spending the time to do the media interviews, to do the radio interviews, to get the word out there to over 100 million people, I really ask myself every day, how many are actually listening? How many know? How many care that 99 illegal aliens on the terror watch list were released by our federal government in the United States? The situation in terms of the people that that are that are coming in these caravans, when the system gets overwhelmed, okay, when the system gets overwhelmed, people, either get processed or the coyotes and the cartels just bring them in. So, before I go any further, is Corey still on the line with us? Yeah, he is. So, Kevin, is it possible that I can introduce Corey and just kind of, he's as passionate about this work as I am, and he lives it every day. Can we bring him on and just let him introduce himself and just
Yes,
kind of,
sure. Yeah, just Corey, you can unmute your mic if you want.
Hey, can you hear me?
sure can.
Hey, yeah, thanks for all that. And so there's the three of us, and then there's a lot more people behind the scenes that are helping us. It's a massive network of people. So we're lucky to have that. And I heard that this was, or I heard you say that this talk was specifically about terrorism. And I don't know if I like to tell you things when we're live because I like to see your reaction. But I just found out some information if you'd like to hear it.
Absolutely.
I gave a small sample of, I didn't physically give them, but I showed a small sample of those IDs to an organization, and we found out that 3 of those Chinese ID cards and or passports, they came back that the 3 gentlemen in there went to actual Chinese spy schools. So they're here, and it's just I think of this thing in three different tiers regarding terrorism. The short term, the stuff that's going to happen quickly, terrorism that's going to happen today, tomorrow, yesterday, which is like the Lake and Riley stuff. The middle ground there, which is the terrorism that's going to happen familiar or similar to what we see with Middle Eastern terror around or in the United States and around the world, where they think things out, think things through, and then they attack. And then the long term, like the Chinese people that are here. And Jared, maybe you could talk more about how difficult it is to leave China and come here, unless you're very wealthy or state sponsored. And you saw all the Chinese stuff that I have, but yeah, it's not getting any better. The people are already here, and now it's just a ticking time bomb, like you said.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Corey's an expert in this. He's right. You don't leave China without the permission and the blessing of the Chinese government. Well, the Chinese government, for years, has been an adversary of the United States, is, doing things that are overt, having a spy balloon go over military bases in the middle of our country, across our country, actually went all the way across. This is a risk. Terrorism does not only look like 9/11. It can come in many different forms. Water supplies. There's been several cases of where there have been attacks to water supplies. Very little coverage in the media. And it, by the time the government's hands, the federal law enforcement's hands, which is a fact. And, Corey could share with you, and he's told me that, he's got this information and this intelligence that the government's not even getting because they're not there. So he's taken it to Homeland Security investigators, and they've said, well, we're not able to really do anything right now because our hands are tied. Let's see what happens with the election. That's insanity. That's insanity. And you know what? I saw it with my own eyes when I was working federal law enforcement in Miami. Shortly after 9/11, if I came across somebody that was illegally in the United States and they had a felony, they were an automatic deportation. And I don't remember how many people, were over that time that I'd interacted with, but it was a simple phone call for Border Patrol to come and to process that person and that person to be sent out of the country. The next administration come in 2008, called the same Border Patrol phone number. They said, oh, we're no longer doing that. You can let them go. And the lack of ability to enforce federal law based on who's in office is insanity. So going back to mass deportation, something that, I struggle with and I put a lot of thought in. So we're not, and I literally just got back from DC yesterday. It's such a frustrating place because there's so many lies told and by our lawmakers. And so, of course, mass deportation came up in the hearing on Tuesday. And our approach on it is there needs to be a tiered system, right? Let's start with deporting terrorists. Let's start with that. Let's do this as in a tiered approach, target the terrorists, deport them. Then go to your cartels, your gangs, organizations that we know are here, we know where they are, they're in and out of jail, and deport them. It is so insane. I could show you a case of just to show how broken the system currently is. A case of an MS-13 member that traffics children, and through what's called the Unaccompanied Child Program, we were sending these children to this registered MS-13 member. Aaron Stevenson, his name is, and if you have an interest in learning more about the story, you can Google his name. So he worked for Department of Homeland Security, and he was basically a screener for who was coming in. And he recognized that Office of Refugee Resettlement is sending children to an different MS-13 members. He reported that up his chain of command. He was told to stay in his own lane. He made noise about it. He actually lost his job over it. Imagine that. The MS-13 member received children that he traffics, yet the whistleblower, because he didn't understand whistleblower protections and how to do it correctly, lost his job over it. So let's focus on those. Let's focus on the known terrorists that are here. Let's focus on the violent gangs and cartels that are illegal migrants, and let's deport them. That's going to take 4 years, for sure. There's other talk about the military. It was on a national news show a couple of days ago, Monday of this week, and they were asking about the military being used. You got to look at it. The military does not. Aside from the National Guard, the military, aside from the Coast Guard, it's really not the military's role. And I think if a tiered approach was taken to targeting the terrorists, the cartels, the gang members, aside from perhaps the National Guard to do security facilities, I really don't see it in military operation. I know that that's a huge talking point right now, and that's something that the media is using to scare people. But let's be realistic. And then the humanitarian side of me says, well, there are people that have come here that, yes, they came here illegally, but they're contributing to our society. They're not committing crime, and they're providing a contribution to our society, staying out of trouble, working hard, pursuing that American dream. We're not going to get to them. And that's the misleading component of the media, is that, families are going to be pulled apart. It's not true. Not true. It's not how the government works. So I'm willing to bet, and as we advocated for, before the Congress, and we were in meetings with the Senate this week, that, this tiered approach will work. So I'm actually gonna be reaching out to Tom Homan about it in a couple weeks. And yeah, maybe in the next speaker series, I'll let you know what he said. So it, we don't have time. Yeah, so the risk of terrorism because of the open border, and also, as Brad Perkins could share with us, do you mind, Kevin, if we put Brad on the line for a couple minutes and he just talks about how the Middle East turmoil can, and the open border has increased the risk of terrorism, because I know he happens to be an expert on it because he's one of my doctoral dissertation students.
Yes, sir. It's your presentation. You can have guests share their expertise. So Brad, you're welcome if you want to turn on your mic.
Absolutely. Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity. As far as the Middle East is concerned, we see organizations like the Houthis, the Hamas, Hezbollah, and I think a lot of people are under the assumption that these terror organizations are just residing or beholden within the Middle East, where in Venezuela, we have Hezbollah has set up shop down there. They are welcome there. It is a sanctuary, if you will, to help navigate and funnel funding. There's been terrorist attacks in South America related directly to Hezbollah and so forth. And what's happening and what we're seeing is not only are we seeing them at the southern tip of Mexico, but we're seeing, I want to say, Todd Bresman said there was about 170 different countries where people have traveled from South America up through the Darien Gap and then traveled on through, then hoping to reach the southwest border of the United States. So we're seeing, as you alluded to earlier, we're seeing a funnel of people coming from the Middle East, from other countries, from China, and through the southern borders.
Absolutely. So it's, it's a fact. It is a risk in terms of terrorism that is, we're at a greater risk of terrorism than, aside from 9/11, than I believe we've ever been. So let's see what we've learned from 9/11, right? So these guys trained, they were methodical, they were well funded. This training went on for a while. And so some people may say, well, okay, so we've released 99 people on terror watch list, but nothing's happened. Well, that doesn't surprise me at all, because terrorist groups often take years of planning, of getting everything the way that they want it to be before they strike. And whether it's, a strike that, brings down a critical infrastructure, whether it's, a couple of years ago, the big risk was a lone wolf. I think it's going to be more complex than that. I think it's going to be related to technology, and we have become so dependent on technology. And when you have people that, are coming from countries that are very tech savvy, it's an increased risk. And as we, go into, now the inauguration, it is a time of uncertainty. It is a time to be aware. It is a time to, see something, say something. When I was still in the Coast Guard, and this was right after 9/11, I was driving, and forgive me, Kevin, I do so much speaking. I want to make sure I haven't told this story. Did I talk about the Port of Miami and the See Something, Say Something campaign?
You did talk about the Port of Miami, that you were there when I think it was 9/11 hit or something like that, and you were involved in securing that area.
Okay. So after 9/11, I was stationed in Miami, and a tour boat operator, we had a big campaign going of See Something, Say Something. And a tour operator noticed a tourist on his boat, was giving a tour in the water, like it was like a tour boat, of a guy that was taking pictures of the base of the Port of Miami bridge, and pictures of law enforcement, and pictures of the infrastructure of the port and asked the boat captain, how close can you get to the port on a jet ski before law enforcement stops you? And he was the boat captain called the 800 number, which went to Washington within minutes, went to Miami Beach, which within minutes I was dispatched to it. And when I got on the boat, I looked at him and I remember how much he stunk. He had really bad body odor. Something that stands out 20 years later. So I asked him if I could see his phone, and I looked in his phone. I'm sorry, his camera. The camera. I look at his camera, and sure enough, it's pictures that no tourist would take. You know, how the bridge operates, you know, the base of the bridge, all these unusual things. So he didn't have any immigration documentation on him. So I felt that he's probably here illegally. He was from Afghanistan. And I took him to, this was before Homeland Security was even developed, I took him to INS, which was the immigration service at the time. And I asked if they could confirm his identity and confirm he's legally in the United States. And so as I'm waiting there, because I actually took him to the port, and as I'm waiting there, like the bells and whistles all of a sudden went off. You've got a bunch of 3-letter agencies marching in, FBI agents showed up. All these different 3-letter agencies show up, and I'm thinking, this is something big. So 4 hours go by, and the date interviewed him. And 4 hours go by, and they come back to me, and they say, okay, you can take him where you found him. I was like, well, tour boat left hours ago. They said, well, just take him wherever you can, but you need to get him off the port. So I was really disappointed that they weren't arresting him. So I took him to wherever his car was. And about 2 months later, I was watching the news as I was making lunch. And I looked at the news, and it's a picture of that guy. So I ran over the television, and it said, suspected terrorist attempts to buy explosives to blow up the Port of Miami Bridge. What the backstory was, because I started digging, to find out what happened, they recognized he was a terrorist and he'd not committed any crimes. So they released him, but they surveilled him. And they put an undercover FBI agent in his taxi in New York, because he was a New York taxi driver, and they built a rapport, and he attempted to buy explosives from the undercover FBI agent and told him it's to go on a jet ski to blow up the Port of Miami. And that in all the counterterrorism work that I did, that was by far the most rewarding, because we literally prevented an attack. And there were other times that we were dealing with a lot of the anthrax stuff and all that at the time. So there was a lot of other risks, but I never hear say something anymore. That campaign still exists. It's just not something that is a priority in the news cycle or even to the government in terms of creating the awareness of the risk of terrorism within the borders of the United States and what citizens could do. And what citizens can do, and most importantly, is to report suspicious activity. And even if, in my case, I didn't see immediate action, I didn't see the guy get arrested. But what it does is it helps federal law enforcement put pieces of the puzzle together to prevent an attack, right? So, somebody who looks like they're making explosives in their garage. Well, that may be just that one extra piece of the puzzle that law enforcement needs to serve a search warrant. But you won't know that, and you'll never know that. Even if you make a report, see something, say something, you'll never know the actual outcome, most likely. So, but it's so critically important, when you're at the airport and you pass that luggage that is abandoned or somebody forgot, is to report it. We were doing that, but we've gotten so far away from that, and we've gotten so far away from the thought of us being hated by terrorist affiliated countries that we've made ourselves even more vulnerable. So I welcome your questions.
Folks, I'll allow anybody who has questions to kind of go first. If you, or if some of Jared's comments somehow have sparked in some kind of curiosity in you. I know, again, if we weren't scared before, we're more scared now. It certainly is something that is absolutely critical, and it's always been one of my, fears, I guess you can say. I lived in Arizona for almost 30 years, And we know we often hear of illegals coming over the border, and often, you know, they probably are a low threat. They're just people coming here to get a job, and they're working, you know, in hotels and migrant workers and stuff, and are not necessarily a threat. But I always had this, you know, idea, well, if 1 million people come over, how many could potentially be terrorists? Even if there's 5 out of 1 million, you know what I mean? These 5 now are integrated within our society, and 5 more comes over, and 5 more come over, and etc. And to now you got hundreds, and they're all spread out and working in a terrorist cell. So, you know, the border and terrorism, they go hand in hand. Immigration and terrorism go hand in hand. And it is something that obviously during this most recent election, you know, was at the forefront of conversation. Is, you know, having an open border puts us at risk, beyond just someone here trying to get a job. You know, most of these people, these spy networks, like you mentioned, of these Chinese guys, are not here to get a job. You know, they're here to do some devious things, and it may take a while. Like you said, they plan in advance, these events. And so I hear some speaker going on. Dr. St. Arnold, did you have a comment or anything to say?
I do. I'm a little under the weather, so please bear with me a little bit. First, I want to thank you for your presentation, and all those who are attending here who are in service to the United States. I want to thank you for your service, because this is some of the most important work that we can be doing right now. I know that Aspen is also really focused on sharing speakers series and publications and so forth of things that are very current and going on in the world right now. And I don't know that we could get a more current topic and more critical topic for right now. And I always like to leave things kind of on a positive note, and I'm kind of struggling a little bit for, I mean, how will we solve this problem? You know, is it Americans aren't prepared for this, and I don't know. I mean, first of all, I will tell you that there might not be a big attendance here, but we do have a large replay audience, and we will be sending that out to a variety of people so that they can see it, hear it. But I'm talking about on a large scale. Do you see the future where the government might have an appetite to address these things that are not spoken about now and should be spoken about and have been going on for years and years and years?
Great questions. Great to see you. Thank you very much for attending. I know you're very busy, and really
Yes, no, I'm very happy to listen. Yeah.
And so there's there's a human trafficking task force that's being developed that is really going to be focusing on this issue. And it's bringing together some of the people that are most vested in this, and have the backgrounds to really help create policy to impact and influence change. So for the human trafficking task force, you know, it's really like that's the step in the right direction, you know, and that's a President Trump human trafficking task force they're putting together, and they're developing plans and then going to develop a team to implement them. And that's why I've been advocating so hard for a tiered approach, starting with the terrorists and then the cartels, then the gangs. And it seems to be resonating. We testified about it. We talked to both the U.S. Senate and Congress about it this week. And I am 100% sure that despite it's going to be a very rocky next year, that a focus will be placed on this by the next administration, and meaningful impact and change is coming, because the day of reckoning of, you know, the cartels being able to operate with impunity and bring anyone that they want across, people being processed at the border that are on the terror watch list that are being released, the accountability that has completely failed under Secretary Mayorkas, you know, is going to be everything's going to be reversed. So I don't think overnight the border is going to be shut down. I don't think that's possible. But, you know, there are people out there like me that care deeply about this issue and are screaming from the mountaintops about it. And, you know, I am confident, based on, you know, being on the Hill this week, that change in a major way is coming. I mean, the border is going to get addressed. You know, it's not an easy thing to secure the border, because more Border Patrol agents is one of the solutions. Well, it takes 4 months to recruit and do a background check, and then 6 months to do academy training. So that puts us out almost a year for Border Patrol. So I don't think it's an overnight fix, but in terms of the terrorists that are currently here, that is something that, I think it's 20,000 HSI and ICE agents. That's something that once their hands are no longer tied and they're able to go and enforce federal law, they're going to be able to go mitigate.
And I'm so glad to hear that, because I think that there might be some objection to coming into some of the states, as I've heard, although that's what you can see on mainstream media. I'm sure there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes, and and I commend you for moving all of this forward, for sure. And if there's any way that we can help you, we're happy to do that. This is a very important topic, and one that affects all of our students and all of our faculty, and everyone across the world, quite frankly.
Right. So I really appreciate that. And coming from the president of the university, let me take that chance to address that. So, really the biggest thing that I really need is the platform, is the ability to reach people. I mean, I know we're doing that here today. The opportunity to to publish articles that aren't necessarily peer reviewed is very helpful for me, because I can go to the border, I can write a series of 600-word articles, and if I can get those pushed out to the students, to staff, to the public, we can make we can create meaningful awareness. But almost a blog, like an Aspen University blog that that we can kind of build up and bring attention to. I can market it. I've got through social media a pretty big platform, and we can really that would be very helpful for me.
We will certainly take this to our Board of Trustees. We're meeting with them in December and have some dialogue around that, because I think in terms of the publications and the platform to do things like we're doing here, yes, I think that's easy enough. An Aspen blog on this particular topic, I would just want to run through the board and ensure that we have that support. I don't see any problem, but I have to hear from them.
Okay.
But it sounds fantastic, Jared.
Thank you. I'd like to put in the chat the congressional hearing from this week, and I'm just trying to figure out how to do that. Let's see.
Just wiggle your cursor, Jared, and you should see at the bottom something that says chat. You can stop sharing too. That may help.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out because once I shared.
Try to unshare. So wiggle your cursor and you should see a pop-up at the bottom that says share, and it probably says stop sharing.
I don't see it. Let's see here. No, there's nothing appearing. I mean, I can X out of this, see if that.
Yeah, but we will still.
Here we go.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, now perfect. Let me just move it up.
While Jared's doing that, I kind of want to again talk about, Jared publishes regularly in our journal. So he's published articles each year, and he presents regularly in our colloquia, and he's done this speaker series as well. So, this topic is important, and it's one of these things where people won't think it's important until there's a terrorist event.
Right.
Sadly, that's what'll unfortunately have to happen before there's enough traction where people all of a sudden get behind this and say, let's go do something about it now. If it doesn't impact you directly, then it's not a problem, right? But
Right.
now all of a sudden when it impacts us, then it's like, oh, we should have done some stuff. And I do believe there will be a terrorist event, and then people will get serious probably about the border. Jared, you say you just also did an interview with Fox News. If you have a link to that and can send it, that'll be helpful.
Absolutely. Let me just find it here real quick.
Yeah. But I kind of want to pull together some strings on things that I've taken notes on. And I know you talked about the wall, and I'm always curious, do those things really work? Because El Chapo just dug a hole underneath it and had tunnels the biggest size of semis. And so what, still prevents that from being the approach? And what about electronic walls? In other words, like, drones and this kind of satellite images, do those things maybe work better than a physical wall? I don't know. I'm brainstorming outside here. And it's the same with mass deportation. You've heard where the Texas governor said he's going to, capture people and deport them back to Mexico. And Mexico said, you're not going to do that because we're not going to accept them. You're not the federal government, and et cetera, et cetera. So if we all of a sudden have this mass deportation, what happens if the other country says we're not accepting them? It's these kinds of challenges that we haven't thought through yet that could throw a kink in our plans, whatever the plan is. And I often wonder, and you hear this all the time, they deport these people and within a month they're back here again. So the solution might not be just get them out. The solution may be you got to get them out and then you got to plug the hose, so they don't get back in. And this is very complex stuff and none of it's cheap. That's part of the challenge we have is it's all costly and you got to get budgets approved and it takes forever for our leaders to, pass budgets and et cetera. That during that time, you just have this constant flow of people over the border while we're trying to figure out how we can cooperate and get things done. So, I think our greatest weakness is our passivity and our naivety. I think Americans, unfortunately, especially our American government, functions under this belief that, well, we're just so big and powerful, no one will do that. No one's going to do that. But they do that stuff and they take advantage of our naivety. I'm sure everywhere in the world, in every country of the world, they know about our border problem.
Right, absolutely.
It's advertised over all the news and and the people that come over and it's even more interesting that these cartels are releasing information to help people understand how to just navigate through that and to get into our country and to be released. And so it's hyper sophisticated and very organized. It's not just random, to have 4,000 people form a caravan. That isn't just a couple people sitting around a coffee shop and said, hey, let's go to America. There's a higher level and sometimes probably government level sponsorship of these things because they know if you flood the border with 4,000 people and you can have 100 of bad people in there, those 100 bad people are going to get through too. And that's all they were caring about is getting through the 100 bad people. So, it's something that unfortunately I don't think is going to go away. I think it's going to continue to, to form threats to us that we aren't even aware of yet. These threats of something that's going to happen 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now started today or started last month or started 4 years ago. And, and you said something that really made me think a lot. And you said acts of terrorism don't only look like 9/11.
It's absolutely true.
That's a powerful statement there, and this guy on a jet ski, how easy is that? I mean, that's just the simplest thing in the world. We're not regulating this. We're not watching people on jet skis and what they're doing. We don't pay attention to that. I think what our those in charge may think is, well, one guy on a jet ski, no big deal. But when you have 1,000 of these people in cars and jet skis and other types of mobile devices that are strapped with some kind of explosive and they all start doing it at once,
Right.
Terrorism, the root of terrorism is terror. You don't have to bring down the government and shut down and blow up everything. You just have to make everybody scared, and these events as they occur create terror. They scare Americans and then you now have panic and a bunch of disjointed, thought in our society and we can't focus at that point on a solution. We're too busy now blaming and doing other things about what should have been done and we get distracted by that. So, go ahead. You look like
I see there's a question in the chat box about the northern border. Did you have a question?
For example, it makes serious questions about statutory rape and other sexual misconduct allegations.
Tracy, you're,
I heard someone's mic on. Maybe they're
Oh,
watching
hi.
TV or something.
there we go.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much. It was so informative and it was so great. Just I wanted to ask you a few questions regarding. I just want to say something. You guys always focus on the South, never ever focus on the North side. Canadian sides, they are actually issuing 10 years visitor visa, multiple entries with the minimum screening based on whatever it happens, whatever it mentions. in the northern Canadian media. So I just want to say, and I just want to raise few questions regarding IRGC, Hezbollah, and their um, their activities in North Side, and especially hiring Hells Angels, hiring even in Europe, they hired Swedish gangs and those type of things. Have you guys actually even think it may come not even always from the south side, and it may comes from the north side? And how serious you guys actually considering the north?
Right. So, yeah. So thank you for your question. So I did border security in the north. So I'm familiar with the issues that exist up there. And, you know, the Mexican government, I could show you pictures, it wouldn't be hard, of the cartel working directly with the Mexican government, with the Mexican military moving drugs. We have drone footage of it. Corey, which is dropped off, but he sent me drone footage of the Mexican government working with cartels in terms of bringing drugs that are killing people into the United States. So that's why I think plus you don't have 10 million people coming through the northern border. Northern border is even more difficult to secure than the southern border, and it is an absolute threat. It is a complete threat that, you know, somebody could come under a tourist visa in Canada with the intention of coming to the United States and engaging in terrorism. It's a major threat, and that border is impossible to secure. You know, it's a lot of it's wooded area. You know, the area that I worked in was the Great Lakes, and I can tell you there is no security. And so to your point, there is a significant risk of terrorists moving into the United States through the northern border, because it's especially in the wooded areas and the areas that are not populated, you know, it's not even clear where the border is.
That is absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it was like, I just want to bring it up to your conversation that, so absolutely, whatever they were coming towards United States, using a different passport, definitely CBSA. They've seen it. We heard about it. A lot of Chinese, as you mentioned, that yes, they crossed it. And even Hezbollah member, they use Mexican passports because, as you know, that in 1980s they moved to Mexico. They obtain a different name, different passport, and they are sleeping cells. So going back to your jet ski stories, I want to add something very, very scary, but very important. It's a potential of Class B aerospaces, or let's correct that. Let's say it's a municipal airports, non controlled airports. So there's a lot of airports that they are off duty at 2000. At 8 p.m. and they will open at 8 a.m. Because it's uncontrolled aerospace. A lot of people, a lot of pilots, they have an access. So those type of things. And if you add a cross-border from north, obviously there is a lot of risk. There is a lot of things, and I hope that the new government, they can actually address those type of things.
Absolutely, they have their work cut out for them. So I've posted in the chat, I posted the hearing. So it's the homeland.house.gov hearing trafficked, exploited, missing children, victims of the Biden-Harris administration. That's there. That's you'll hear from 3 of the 4 witnesses were honest and were powerful. The 4th one was not. You know, fortunately, she refused to answer a lot of questions. But I'm to the point now that I'm so frustrated that, you know, I'm willing to speak truth. You know, and suffer whatever consequence comes, because somebody has to speak truth. Somebody has to speak truth for the 320,000 children that were processed at the border and sent to unvetted sponsors and are completely missing and unaccounted for. Somebody needs to speak truth for how opening our borders has created an unprecedented level of risk of domestic, so when I say of terrorism in the United States within our borders. I also put my website on there. So this is only growing, right? Like I said, we've reached now, as of this week, over 100 million people with the message, and we're having more media interview requests than we're actually able to keep up with. So, I encourage you to go to the website, follow me on social media, and I am fully in this fight.
Jared, I'd like to personally thank you as an American for what you do for all of us, here in America. But as an Aspen employee, I personally thank you as well for choosing us, as one of your locations to share your expertise, and to teach our students, because they are able to get, a very critical expert on this topic. You just literally are coming back from DC. You're like hot off the presses, in a congressional hearing that took place just days ago, and on this specific topic. Yeah. Here's what I believe will again be something that, we would never think that would happen. But you'll have one of these terrorist groups commit a terrorist act, and then they're going to take a bunch of hostages, just like they did in Israel. And then we're going to have 100 or 200 American hostages that are being hid out somewhere in the United States, and we can't find them. And then that's a whole new level, of our response.
Let's not give any.
Don't give them any ideas. I know, but you
No.
understand how
That's not gonna happen.
but that's different than saying I'm gonna crash an airplane. They're like, oh, okay, well, the terrorist died, and it blew up some stuff and some people died. Okay, that's over with. But once they start taking hostages and concealing them and hiding them and putting them in places and we can't find them, that's just a different level. And that's sort of the stuff that they're doing now. They're not just crashing, stuff, and they're not just blowing themselves up with vests anymore. They're now taking human collateral because it's used as a bargaining tool, or it's used in order to prevent attacks on their, on wherever they're hiding, because we're afraid we're going to blow up a hostage. So I don't want to scare more people, but these are the things that go through my brain that we don't think about. We keep thinking of 9/11. And again, you made me reflect when you said not all acts of terrorism look like 9/11.
Right.
That whole October 7th thing in Israel didn't look like 9/11. It was just people rushing over the border, and they go grab people in Jeeps and then drive back into Palestine. And then that's been going on for over a year now. It wasn't just an airplane crash. It was less sophisticated, to be honest. And it's actually had a longer impact than maybe what our 9/11 did. That lasted only a couple of days of us, of dealing with that. We've had to deal with it forever, obviously, beyond that. But the event itself was done and over with. But when you take people hostage, that is a constant act of terrorism and abuse of those family members over that time period. Anyway, everyone, enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
And also, we'll see you hopefully on December the 3rd. That's when Jared's third part of his series will commence, and we will continue with this conversation in the speaker series. Dr. Sadowski, good luck to you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you again for you sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Opportunity.
Take
Bye.
care.